The morning started like any other Tuesday on Earth. People woke up, had coffee, and went to work. Children played in parks. Traffic jams formed in big cities. Nobody expected that by lunchtime everything would change forever. At exactly 12 root noon, Greenwich Mean Time, the sky darkened. Not with clouds, but with something much worse. Massive ships appeared above every major city on Earth. They were huge, each one bigger than a mountain. Their metal hulls blocked out the sun, casting long shadows over millions of people who stood in the streets, looking up in shock. The ships had come from nowhere. Earth's satellites hadn't seen them coming. Military radar showed nothing until they were already there, hanging in the sky like deadly storm clouds. The ships were black and smooth, with no windows or lights that humans could see. They just floated there, silent and threatening. President Chen stood in the White House Situation Room, surrounded by generals and advisors. Everyone was shouting at once, trying to understand what was happening. The phones rang constantly with calls from world leaders, all asking the same question: what do we do? "Sir," said General Morrison, his face pale, "our missiles can't reach them. They're too high up and we don't know what kind of shields they might have." Before the president could answer, every screen in the room flickered. Then a voice spoke. Not through their speakers, but somehow directly into their minds. It spoke in perfect English, but everyone around the world heard it in their own language at the same time. "People of Earth," the voice said. It sounded cold and emotionless, like a computer trying to sound human. "We are the Hegemony. We rule this galaxy. You will listen." The voice paused, and images appeared on every screen, television, and phone on Earth. The images showed space. Vast, dark space filled with stars. Then the stars began to disappear one by one, until whole sections of the galaxy went black. "We have conquered 847 worlds," the voice continued. "We have destroyed the civilizations that refused to surrender. Their planets are now empty. Their people are gone forever." More images flashed across the screens. Beautiful planets covered in strange cities, filled with alien beings that looked nothing like humans. Then the same planets appeared again, but now they were burned and lifeless. Nothing remained but ash and empty buildings. "Each species thought they were special," the voice said. "Each species thought they could fight us. They were wrong. They are all dead now." In the UN building in New York, delegates from every nation sat in stunned silence. Secretary General Williams gripped the arms of his chair so hard his knuckles turned white. Around him, translators whispered urgently into their phones, though the alien voice needed no translation. "You have 7 of your days to decide," the voice announced. "Surrender completely and you will live as our servants. Refuse and you will die like all the others. We will burn your cities. We will poison your air. We will make sure nothing lives on this world ever again." The images changed again, showing massive weapons that could crack planets in half, ships that could move faster than light, technology that was thousands of years ahead of anything humans had built. "We know you are watching. We know you are afraid. This is good. Fear will make you wise. In 7 days we will return for your answer. Choose carefully." The voice stopped. The images disappeared. The screens went back to normal news broadcasts, but the reporters could barely speak. They just stared at their cameras, trying to find words for something that had no words. Around the world, people stood in the streets, on their balconies, in their offices, all looking up at the ships that still blocked out the sun. Some people cried. Some people prayed. Some people ran home to hug their families. But in the UN building, something strange happened. Secretary General Williams stood up slowly. He looked around the room at all the frightened faces of the world's leaders. Then, impossibly, he smiled. Not a scared smile or a crazy smile, but a real, genuine smile. "Did everyone hear that?" he asked. The French ambassador nodded weakly. "They want us to surrender or die." "Yes," Williams said, his smile growing wider. "They do." "Sir," said the British representative, "with respect, this doesn't seem like something to smile about. They just threatened to destroy our entire planet." Williams walked to the center of the room. Other delegates began to notice his strange calm. A few of them even started to look less scared. "Tell me," Williams said, "what did you hear when they spoke?" "Threat," said the German chancellor. "Death, destruction." "I heard something else," Williams said. He pressed a button and his own voice filled the room through the speakers. "I heard them tell us exactly how they've conquered every other world." He paused, looking around the room. More delegates were starting to sit up straighter, paying attention. They said every species thought they were special. Every species thought they could fight them. But you know what I didn't hear? The room was completely quiet now. I didn't hear them say that any species ever tried to surrender, Williams said. His smile was now so wide it looked almost silly. They've never had anyone just give up before. The Russian president frowned. You want us to surrender? Oh yes, Williams said, laughing now. Absolutely. We're going to surrender so completely, so perfectly, that they won't know what hit them. The room erupted in confused voices, but Williams held up his hand for silence. Ladies and gentlemen, he said, I need to make some phone calls. We have 7 days to prepare the most thorough surrender in galactic history. As the delegates filed out, still confused and worried, Williams remained behind. He picked up his secure phone and dialed a number that very few people in the world knew. Dr. Chen, he said when the call connected. It's Williams. I need you to gather your team immediately. Dr. Sarah Chen was Earth's leading expert on alien languages and communication. She had spent her whole career preparing for this day, though she had always hoped it would never come. You saw the broadcast? She asked. Everyone did, Williams said. Tell me, what did you think of their translation methods? There was a pause on the other end. Then Dr. Chen laughed, just like Williams had. Their computers are very good, she said. Too good, actually. They translate meaning perfectly, but they miss everything else. Everything else? The things that make us human, Dr. Chen said. Jokes, sarcasm, double meanings, cultural references. Their machines can't handle the chaos of human communication. Williams nodded, even though she couldn't see him. How quickly can you put together a complete analysis of their communication systems? Give me 6 days, Dr. Chen said. But sir, what exactly are you planning? Williams looked out the window at the giant alien ship hanging over New York City. People on the streets below looked like tiny ants, scared and helpless. I'm planning to give them exactly what they asked for, Williams said. A complete surrender. They're going to get every single thing they expect from a conquered species. And then, Williams' smile became even wider. And then they're going to learn why no other species in the galaxy has ever been quite like humans. He hung up the phone and walked to his desk. There was a lot of work to do and only 7 days to do it. But for the first time since the ships appeared, Williams felt hopeful. The aliens thought they knew how this would end. They had done it hundreds of times before, but they had never conquered a species that turned surrender into a weapon. The countdown had begun. 6 days had passed since the aliens delivered their ultimatum. Around the world, humans had done exactly what they promised. They surrendered. Every military base lowered its flags. Soldiers put down their weapons and waited for orders that would never come. Nuclear submarines surfaced and opened their missile compartments to show they were empty. Fighter jets landed and stayed on the ground. The alien ships watched everything from their positions above Earth cities. Inside their command centers, alien officers observed human behavior with growing satisfaction. This was going exactly as planned. Commander Zektar of the Third Fleet monitored the surrender preparations from his ship above London. He was a tall, thin creature with gray skin and large black eyes. Like all members of the Hegemony, he had served in dozens of conquests before this one. The humans are being remarkably cooperative, reported his intelligence officer, Lieutenant Vexal. All their military forces have stood down. Their governments are broadcasting compliance messages. Zektar nodded approvingly. Perhaps this species has wisdom that others lacked. Show me their surrender broadcasts. The main screen filled with images from Earth. President Chen stood behind a podium in Washington, addressing the world. My fellow Americans and citizens of Earth, the president said calmly. As your leader, I have made the decision to fully comply with the Hegemony's demands. We will cooperate completely with their occupation forces. I ask every person on Earth to welcome our new administrators and follow their instructions without question. Similar broadcasts played from every capital city. The British Prime Minister, the German Chancellor, the Japanese Prime Minister, all delivering the same message. Total submission, complete cooperation. Excellent, Zektar said. This will be the smoothest conquest in Hegemony history. But Lieutenant Vexal looked troubled. Sir, there's something odd about their communication patterns. Explain. Vexal pulled up a detailed analysis of human broadcasts. Our translation computers are working perfectly. We understand every word they say. But there seem to be layers to their speech that our systems can't quite process. Zektar frowned. This was unusual. Hegemony translation technology was the most advanced in the galaxy. It could decode any language, any form of communication. What kind of layers? I'm not sure, sir. Sometimes they say one thing, but their facial expressions suggest they mean something else. And they keep using phrases that translate correctly but don't make logical sense. On the screen, President Chen was finishing his speech. I want to assure the hegemony that Earth is looking forward to this new chapter in our history. We're ready to show them everything that makes humanity special. Zektar watched the president's face carefully. The human was smiling, but something about the smile seemed wrong. It wasn't the defeated expression of a conquered leader. It looked almost pleased. Perhaps they're simply relieved, Zektar decided. Many species feel better once they accept the inevitable. Meanwhile, in a hidden bunker beneath the Swiss Alps, Dr. Sarah Chen worked frantically with her team of linguists, computer experts, and cultural anthropologists. The room was filled with screens showing alien broadcasts, human responses, and complex translation algorithms. How's the analysis coming? Asked Dr. Martinez, her second-in-command. Better than I hoped, Dr. Chen replied, pointing to a chart on the main screen. Their translation system is incredibly sophisticated, but it has one major flaw. What's that? It's too literal. It translates words and basic meanings perfectly, but it completely misses context, subtext, and cultural nuance. Watch this. She played a recording of a human news anchor saying, "The weather today is sunny with a chance of rain." The alien translation system converted it to their language perfectly. Now watch this, Dr. Chen said. She played another clip where the same anchor said, "The weather today is sunny, but I'd keep an umbrella handy. You never know when clouds might roll in." The alien system translated the first part correctly, but the second part confused it. The reference to keeping an umbrella handy when talking about clouds was translated as a literal weather report, missing the metaphorical meaning entirely. They don't understand metaphors, Dr. Martinez realized, or sarcasm, or irony, or any form of indirect communication, Dr. Chen confirmed. Their entire civilization appears to be based on direct literal communication. They say exactly what they mean, and they assume everyone else does too. So when humans talk about being ready to show them what makes humanity special, they hear it as simple compliance. They have no idea it could mean anything else. Dr. Chen pulled up another screen showing global communication patterns. All over Earth, humans were using phrases that sounded perfectly normal to alien translators but carried hidden meanings to other humans. News anchors spoke about new opportunities for cultural exchange. Military leaders discussed innovative cooperation strategies. Scientists talked about sharing human knowledge with our new friends. To the aliens, it all sounded like eager submission. They had no way of knowing that cultural exchange was code for mimetic warfare, that cooperation strategies meant resistance plans, and that sharing knowledge was actually cognitive infiltration. Are we really going to try this? Dr. Martinez asked. Defeating an advanced alien civilization with language? Dr. Chen smiled, the same kind of smile that Secretary General Williams had worn in the UN building. Not just language, culture. Humans have something that no other species in the galaxy appears to have. What's that? Chaos. Beautiful, creative, productive chaos. She pointed to a map of the world where thousands of different languages were marked in different colors. Look at this. 8 billion humans speaking over 7,000 different languages. Each language shaped by unique cultures, histories, and ways of thinking. Each one full of jokes, stories, songs, and ideas that make no sense to outsiders. Dr. Martinez stared at the map. Most species would see that as a weakness. All that division and confusion. Most species would, Dr. Chen agreed. But we've learned to use it as a strength. We've spent thousands of years figuring out how to communicate across cultural barriers. How to translate not just words, but entire ways of thinking. She opened another file showing the alien communication protocols they had intercepted. The hegemony is the opposite. 12 species, but they all think the same way. They've spent millennia standardizing their communication, eliminating confusion, making everything logical and predictable. That sounds efficient. It is efficient, but it's also vulnerable. Dr. Chen's smile grew wider. They've never encountered a species that weaponizes confusion. They have no defense against ideas that don't fit their logical patterns. On the surface, the surrender continued exactly as planned. Human leaders made more speeches about cooperation. Military units reported to designated areas and waited for alien orders. Cities prepared welcome ceremonies for their new administrators, but underneath the surface, something else was happening. Dr. Chen's team had distributed special communication protocols to resistance cells around the world. These weren't military units. They were teachers, artists, comedians, and storytellers. In New York, a group of stand-up comedians received their instructions. When the aliens arrive, the message said, tell them jokes. Use lots of puns, wordplay, and references they won't understand. Be as confusing as possible while appearing helpful. In Tokyo, musicians got a different message. Teach them songs with double meanings. Show them how the same words can mean completely different things depending on how you sing them. In Mumbai, a team of Bollywood writers prepared scripts that would introduce aliens to the concept of dramatic irony. Stories where the audience knows something the characters don't. All across Earth, humans prepared for the strangest invasion in galactic history. They would surrender completely just as they promised. But they would surrender in the most human way possible with creativity, humor, and enough cultural chaos to break the mind of any logical alien computer system. Commander Zektar stood on his bridge, watching the final day of the countdown approach. Everything was proceeding perfectly. Soon Earth would be just another conquered world in the Hegemony's vast empire. Sir, Lieutenant Vexall reported, the humans are sending final confirmation of their surrender. They're requesting permission to begin formal greeting ceremonies for our arrival. Excellent. What kind of ceremonies? They want to show us their cultural heritage and demonstrate their eagerness to learn from superior civilizations. Standard submission behavior. Zektar nodded, satisfied. Begin the landing procedures. This conquest is complete. But as the alien ships prepared to land, Dr. Chen sat in her bunker, watching the countdown clock reach 0. She picked up her radio and broadcast a single message to every resistance cell on Earth. Welcome to the revolution, she said simply. The aliens were about to learn what humanity really meant by surrender. The alien ships landed in perfect formation around the world. Massive transport vessels touched down in major cities, their metal hulls gleaming in the sunlight. Smaller ships positioned themselves over important military and government buildings. The occupation of Earth had officially begun. Commander Zektar stepped out of his landing craft in London's Hyde Park. The grass had been flattened under the ship's weight, creating a perfect circle of crushed earth. Hundreds of humans waited in neat lines just as they had been instructed. They held welcome signs and flowers. Greetings, Commander, said Prime Minister Thompson, stepping forward with a bright smile. We're honored to welcome you to Earth. We've prepared a full reception ceremony to celebrate this historic moment. Zektar nodded approvingly. The human leader showed proper respect and submission. This was exactly how a conquered species should behave. We accept your surrender, Zektar replied through his translation device. You will now follow hegemony protocols for occupied worlds. Of course, Thompson said, still smiling. We're eager to learn your ways. But first, we'd love to share some of our human customs with you, as a gesture of friendship. Before Zektar could respond, a group of human children approached carrying bouquets of flowers. They began singing a song in English, their voices sweet and innocent. The translation device converted their words. Welcome to our world, we hope you'll stay, we want to learn from you today. It seemed perfectly harmless. A traditional greeting ceremony, exactly what conquered species usually offered. Zektar accepted the flowers politely, but the children kept singing, adding verses that made the translation device work harder. They sang about bridges over troubled water and walking on sunshine and dancing like nobody's watching. The translator struggled with the metaphors, trying to make literal sense of phrases that had no literal meaning. Similar scenes played out around the world. In New York, jazz musicians played welcome songs full of improvisation and musical jokes that no alien computer could decode. In Paris, poets recited verses about love and loss that contained 17 different meanings depending on how you interpreted them. In Beijing, calligraphy experts demonstrated writing that looked like simple pictures but contained layers of meaning that had developed over thousands of years. Each character could mean dozens of different things depending on context. The aliens dutifully recorded everything. Their computers translated the basic words but missed the deeper meanings entirely. They filed reports saying that humans were sharing cultural data and traditional information systems. What they didn't realize was that every song, every poem, every joke was a carefully designed virus, created by Dr. Chen's team to exploit the weaknesses in alien communication systems. Lieutenant Vexal sat in his communication center aboard the command ship, monitoring the integration of human cultural data into hegemony systems. Everything seemed normal at first. The translation computers processed the human input and filed it appropriately. But after 3 days, strange things began happening, sir, his assistant reported. There's an anomaly in our communication protocols. What kind of anomaly? Our computers are starting to flag certain phrases as unclear or requires context. That's never happened before. Vexal frowned. Hegemony translation technology didn't need context. It was designed to work with pure logical communication. Show me examples. The assistant pulled up recent military reports. They were written in standard hegemony format, but something was wrong. Patrol Unit 7 reports all quiet on the Western Front. One report read. However, it's not over until it's over, and we shouldn't count our chickens before they hatch. Vexal stared at the report. The first part made perfect sense. The second part was gibberish. What were chickens? Why would anyone count them? And what did hatching have to do with military patrols? Where did this language come from? He demanded. The patrol unit was stationed near a human educational facility. The humans were teaching their children traditional stories and songs. More reports flowed in, each one stranger than the last. Military commanders were using phrases like, the whole 9 yards and back to square one and it's raining cats and dogs. The translation computers dutifully converted these into alien languages. But the meanings made no sense. Worse, the nonsensical phrases were spreading. Alien officers who had never been to Earth were starting to use them in their own reports. They didn't know what the phrases meant, but somehow they felt right. In Tokyo, Commander Raleigh was experiencing the same problem. He had been assigned to oversee the integration of human technology with hegemony systems. It should have been simple. Humans had primitive computers that could be easily absorbed into the alien network, but the human computers were behaving strangely. Commander, his technical specialist reported, the human systems appear to be infected with some kind of logic virus. Explain. They keep asking questions that don't have answers. Like, what is the sound of one hand clapping? And if a tree falls in a forest and no one hears it, does it make a sound? Raleigh examined the data. These weren't real questions, they were paradoxes, designed to break logical thinking patterns. But somehow they were spreading through the hegemony network. Purge the infected systems, he ordered. We've tried, sir. But every time we remove them, they reappear somewhere else. And now our own computers are starting to generate similar questions. Back on the command ship above New York, Commander Zektar was dealing with his own crisis. His crew was becoming increasingly difficult to manage. Sir, Lieutenant Vexal reported, the humans have requested permission to install cultural exchange programs on our education systems. What kind of programs? Entertainment media. They call them movies and television shows. They claim it will help us understand human culture better. Zektar considered this. Understanding the conquered species was always useful for maintaining control. Very well. Install their programs. The first movie they watched was called The Princess Bride. It seemed like a simple story about a princess and her rescue. But as the alien computers tried to process it, they encountered something they had never seen before. A story within a story within a story. The movie was about a grandfather reading a book to his grandson. But the book was about a princess, but the princess's story was actually about true love. But the true love story was really about revenge. But the revenge plot was actually about justice. But the justice theme was fundamentally about the power of good storytelling. The alien analysis computers crashed trying to figure out which layer was the real story. Run it again, Zektar ordered. They watched it 17 times. Each time the computers found new layers of meaning they had missed before. References to other stories, jokes that only made sense if you understood human history, characters who said one thing but meant another. Sir, Vexal said weakly, I think I'm starting to understand human humor. That's impossible. Humor serves no logical function. I know, sir. But when the character said, hello, my name is Inigo Montoya. You killed my father, prepare to die. I felt amused. Zektar stared at his lieutenant. This was unprecedented. Hegemony species didn't experience amusement. They experienced satisfaction when tasks were completed efficiently, but never this strange emotion that served no practical purpose. Around the world, other alien commanders were reporting similar problems. Their troops were becoming infected with human concepts that had no logical basis. Creativity, humor, curiosity, individual expression. In Moscow, alien soldiers had started asking why when given orders, instead of simply following them. In Lagos, aliens were experimenting with music, trying to understand why humans made sounds that served no functional purpose but somehow made them feel something. In Dr. Chen's bunker, she watched the reports streaming in from resistance cells around the world. The plan was working better than she had hoped. The infection rate is incredible, Dr. Martinez reported. Alien communication systems are breaking down faster than we expected. That's because they've never encountered organic chaos before, Dr. Chen explained. Their entire civilization is based on logical, predictable patterns. Human culture is the exact opposite. It's creative, contradictory, and completely unpredictable. But will it be enough to stop them? Dr. Chen pulled up a galaxy-wide communication map showing hegemony networks. Red dots were appearing across the entire system as human concepts spread through their communication channels. Stop them? She laughed. We're not trying to stop them. We're trying to set them free. On the screen, reports were coming in from across the galaxy. Alien worlds that had been conquered centuries ago were suddenly experiencing something they had never felt before: the desire to think for themselves. The revolution had begun, and it was spreading at the speed of light. 3 weeks after the occupation began, the Hegemony High Command received their first emergency report from the front lines. It came from Commander Zektar, and it made no sense whatsoever. Central Command, the report began. We have a situation here that's really gotten out of hand. The humans are still cooperating fully, but something's rotten in Denmark, if you know what I mean. Admiral Kexmore read the report 3 times before calling an emergency meeting. She was the supreme commander of the Hegemony fleet, a position she had held for 200 years. In all that time, she had never received a military report that included the phrase, "Something's rotten in Denmark." What does this mean? She demanded of her intelligence staff. What is Denmark? And why is something rotting there? Her chief analyst, a thin creature named Veltar, looked equally confused. Denmark appears to be a region on Earth, but our scanners show no signs of decay or decomposition. The phrase seems to be some kind of metaphor. Metaphor? A form of human communication where they say one thing, but mean something completely different. Admiral Kexmore felt something she had never experienced before. A headache. Why would any species develop communication that deliberately confuses meaning? More reports were arriving from other commanders. Each one was stranger than the last. From Mars base. The human workers are still following orders, but they're marching to the beat of a different drummer and, frankly, we're barking up the wrong tree. From the moon station. Everything's coming up roses, but I have a gut feeling we're opening a can of worms. From Earth orbit. The situation is as clear as mud, but don't count your chickens before they hatch. This is madness, Admiral Kexmore declared. Our commanders are losing the ability to communicate logically, but the problem was spreading beyond just the military reports. Across the Hegemony's vast communication network, strange new phrases were appearing. Words that had never existed in any alien language were being created spontaneously. On the conquered world of Rexel Prime, factory workers who had labored in silence for 300 years suddenly started singing while they worked. The songs had no practical purpose, but somehow they made the work feel less oppressive. On Theta Colony, alien children began asking their parents questions like, "Why is the sky blue?" And "What makes flowers grow?" These were questions that had answers, but the children kept asking why, after each answer, creating infinite loops of curiosity that served no logical function. Most disturbing of all, Hegemony soldiers throughout the galaxy were beginning to question their orders. "Sir," a trooper reported to his commander on Vega Station, "why are we guarding this facility?" "Because those are our orders," the commander replied automatically. "Yes, sir, but why were those orders given?" "To maintain security." "But why do we need security?" "To prevent rebellion." "But why would anyone rebel?" The commander paused. This was a question he had never considered before. Because rebellions disrupt order. But why is order important? For the first time in his life, a hegemony commander found himself unable to answer a simple question. Order was important because it had always been important, but why? Similar conversations were happening throughout the galaxy. The concept of why was spreading like a virus, and no one in the hegemony knew how to stop it. In the hegemony High Council chambers, the 12 ruling species met in emergency session. They had conquered hundreds of worlds without ever facing a crisis like this. The infection has reached the core worlds, reported Council member Zelnath. Our own people are beginning to exhibit symptoms. What kind of symptoms? Asked Council leader Mortek. Creativity, individual thought, emotional responses that serve no logical purpose. Zelnath paused, looking uncomfortable. Some of them are even laughing. A shocked silence filled the chamber. Laughter was a human behavior that the hegemony had identified as completely pointless. It served no survival function, provided no tactical advantage, and accomplished no measurable goal. How is this possible? Mortek demanded. Our species evolved beyond such primitive behaviors millions of years ago. The humans appear to have weaponized their own chaos, Zelnath explained. Every interaction with them introduces our people to concepts that our minds cannot properly process. Our computers cannot filter them out because they're embedded in normal conversation. Dr. Chen watched the panic spread through the hegemony networks from her underground command center. Her screens showed real-time data from across the galaxy, and the results were beyond her wildest dreams. Report from Sector 7, Dr. Martinez announced. The Klaxon species has just declared independence from the hegemony. They say they want to find themselves and follow their dreams. Sector 12 reports that the Vorthan world is refusing to send their monthly tribute. They claim they need the resources to build something called art galleries. And Sector 3 says the entire Nexol fleet has abandoned their posts. They're flying around space with no destination, claiming they want to see what's out there. Dr. Chen smiled as she watched 800 years of galactic oppression crumble in real time. The hegemony had maintained control through rigid hierarchy and absolute obedience. But human concepts like personal freedom, individual choice, and the right to be different were proving to be more destructive than any weapon. Back on Earth, the aliens were experiencing the revolution firsthand. Commander Zektar sat in his quarters, staring at a human book he had confiscated during a routine inspection. It was called The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and he couldn't stop reading it. The book made no sense. It was about a man whose planet was destroyed to make way for a space highway, who then traveled through the galaxy with an alien who wrote travel guides. None of the events were logical, and the entire universe was portrayed as fundamentally absurd. But somehow, Zektar found it funny. He had never experienced humor before, but now he understood why humans valued it. When everything was terrible and meaningless, laughter was the only sane response. Sir? Lieutenant Vexal entered the room looking concerned. Are you feeling well? Vexal, Zektar said, looking up from the book. Do you ever wonder what the point of all this is? All what, sir? Conquering worlds. Following orders. Maintaining the hegemony. Zektar closed the book and looked directly at his lieutenant. What if we're the bad guys? Vexal stared at his commander in shock. The concept of bad guys was a human invention. The hegemony didn't think in terms of good and evil. They thought in terms of efficient and inefficient, but now, looking at the conquered humans who sang while they worked and told jokes while they suffered, Vexal was beginning to understand the difference. Sir, he said quietly, I think I've been asking myself the same question. Similar conversations were happening in every alien unit on Earth. Hegemony soldiers were discovering concepts like guilt, empathy, and moral responsibility. They were learning that efficiency wasn't the only way to measure success, and that some things were worth doing even if they served no practical purpose. The revolution had reached a tipping point. Admiral Kexmore received reports that entire sectors of the galaxy were declaring independence. Conquered species that had been enslaved for centuries were suddenly remembering what freedom felt like. How do we stop this? She demanded in another emergency council session. We could destroy Earth, suggested one council member. Remove the source of the infection. It's too late, Zelnath replied. The human concepts have already spread throughout our network. Destroying Earth would only prove to our own people that we're capable of evil. Evil. Mortek was confused. What is evil? Another human concept, Zelnath explained. It means causing unnecessary suffering for selfish gain. The council fell silent as they realized what this meant. If evil was causing unnecessary suffering for selfish gain, then the hegemony had been evil for thousands of years. What do we do? Mortek asked, and for the first time in hegemony history, a supreme leader sounded lost and uncertain. On Earth, Dr. Chen received a message that made her laugh out loud. It was from an alien communication station in deep space, and it was addressed to the humans who broke our brains. Please help, the message read. We don't know how to be free. Can you teach us? The greatest empire in galactic history was asking a small blue planet for lessons in liberty. The revolution was complete. 6 months after the occupation began, Earth had become the strangest place in the galaxy. What started as a conquered world had transformed into something unprecedented, a school for revolution. Former alien commanders now sat in human classrooms, learning about concepts they had never encountered before. Commander Zektar raised his hand tentatively during a philosophy class in London. Dr. Williams, he said, still struggling with the informal tone humans used in educational settings. I don't understand this concept of democracy. If everyone has different opinions, how do you make decisions? Dr. Williams, who had been a political science professor before becoming an alien education specialist, smiled patiently. That's exactly the right question, Zektar. The point isn't to eliminate different opinions, it's to find ways to work with them. Around the classroom, aliens from 12 different species took notes with the desperate intensity of students cramming for the most important test of their lives. They were learning how to think for themselves, and it was the hardest thing any of them had ever attempted. But disagreement creates inefficiency, protested Vexal, who sat in the front row. The hegemony succeeded because everyone followed the same plans. The hegemony succeeded at conquest, Dr. Williams agreed. But did it succeed at creating happiness? Or progress? Or art? Or love? The alien students looked confused. These concepts were still new to them, but they were beginning to understand that efficiency wasn't the only measure of success. Similar classes were happening around the world. In Tokyo, aliens learned about cultural diversity by participating in tea ceremonies, attending kabuki performances, and trying to understand why humans had developed thousands of different ways to prepare food, when basic nutrition could be achieved much more simply. In New York, former hegemony officers attended comedy shows, trying to understand why humans found pleasure in jokes that served no survival function. Most of the humor went over their heads, but they were beginning to appreciate the way laughter brought people together. In Mumbai, aliens learned to dance, moving their bodies to rhythms that had no logical purpose, but somehow expressed emotions they were just learning to feel. The transformation wasn't limited to Earth. Across the galaxy, the revolution continued to spread through the hegemony's former empire. On Rexel Prime, the enslaved factory workers had declared independence and established their own government. Their first official act was to rename their world New Hope and paint all the gray buildings in bright colors. The Klaxon species had rediscovered their ancient art forms, creating music that combined mathematical precision with emotional expression. Their songs were broadcast throughout their sector of space, inspiring other species to find their own creative voices. The Vorthan people had become explorers, sending ships to distant galaxies not to conquer but to learn. They wanted to discover what other forms of life might exist beyond the hegemony's controlled territory. But the most dramatic change came from the Hegemony High Council. Itself, Admiral Kexmore stood before the assembled council members, but her title no longer meant what it once had. Half the hegemony's member species had declared independence, and the rest were demanding fundamental changes to their society. Fellow council members, she began, then paused and corrected herself. Fellow beings, she said, using a term that acknowledged them as individuals rather than representatives of their species. We have a choice to make. We can try to fight this revolution, attempting to restore the old order through force, or we can embrace what the humans have taught us and build something better. Council member Zelnath spoke up. The humans destroyed our empire without firing a single shot. They defeated us with ideas we couldn't resist because deep down we knew they were right. Right about what? Asked another council member. that every thinking being deserves the chance to choose their own path. That diversity makes us stronger, not weaker, that there are things more important than efficiency. The debate that followed would have been impossible under the old hegemony system. Council members disagreed with each other, argued different points of view, and even changed their minds when presented with better arguments. It was chaotic, inefficient, and absolutely nothing like the rigid decision-making process they had used for thousands of years. It was also the most productive discussion the council had ever held. On Earth, Dr. Chen received daily reports from around the galaxy. The former hegemony was reorganizing itself into a loose confederation of independent worlds, each developing their own governments, cultures, and ways of life. "It's working better than we hoped," Dr. Martinez reported. "Some worlds are choosing democracy, others are trying different forms of cooperative government. A few species are even experimenting with concepts they invented themselves." "Any conflicts?" Dr. Chen asked. "Surprisingly few. It seems that once species learn to think for themselves, they also learn to respect others' right to be different. But the most satisfying reports came from individual aliens who had found their own paths to freedom." Commander Zektar had resigned his military commission and become a teacher. He now traveled between worlds, helping other former hegemony officers learn how to live without rigid hierarchies. Lieutenant Vexal had discovered a talent for music. He was working with human composers to create songs that helped aliens process their newfound emotions. Admiral Kexmore herself had become an ambassador, working to establish peaceful relationships between the new independent worlds. Not all the changes were easy. Some aliens struggled with the responsibility of making their own choices. Others felt lost without the clear structure that the hegemony had provided. But human volunteers worked patiently with them, sharing the lessons that humanity had learned over thousands of years of trial and error. "Freedom isn't easy," Dr. Chen explained to a group of newly liberated aliens. "It's actually much harder than following orders. But it's also more rewarding." "How do you know when you're making the right choice?" asked a young alien who had never made a decision more complex than which corridor to patrol. "You don't," Dr. Chen admitted. "Sometimes you make mistakes. Sometimes you hurt people you care about. Sometimes you fail completely." The alien looked distressed. "Then why choose freedom?" Dr. Chen smiled. "Because even when you make mistakes, they're your mistakes. You learn from them, you grow from them, and you become a better person. When someone else makes all your choices for you, you never get the chance to become who you're meant to be." As the first anniversary of the invasion approached, Earth prepared for a celebration unlike any in galactic history. Representatives from hundreds of worlds would gather to commemorate the day that an empire fell, not to weapons but to ideas. The ceremony took place in the same London park where Commander Zektar had first landed. But now the crushed grass had grown back, and the area was filled with flowers planted by human and alien children working together. Secretary General Williams, now wearing the title of Galactic Ambassador for Freedom, stepped up to the podium. Around him sat thousands of beings from dozens of species, all of them free to choose their own paths for the first time in their lives. "1 year ago," Williams began, "aliens came to Earth demanding our submission. They expected us to follow the same pattern as hundreds of other conquered worlds. But humanity had a different response." He paused, looking out at the diverse crowd. "We smiled. We smiled because we knew something that the hegemony had forgotten in their thousands of years of conquest." "What's that?" called out a voice from the crowd. It was Zektar, now comfortable enough with human customs to interrupt a formal speech. Williams grinned. "We knew that the most powerful force in the universe isn't technology or weapons or even force of will. It's the simple idea that every thinking being has the right to think for themselves." The applause that followed wasn't the polite, measured response that would have been appropriate in the old hegemony. It was loud, chaotic, and completely spontaneous. Some beings clapped, others made their species equivalent of approval sounds, and a few humans whooped and cheered. It was beautiful, messy, and perfectly human. Dr. Chen stood at the back of the crowd, watching the celebration with deep satisfaction. Humanity had faced extinction and responded by freeing an entire galaxy. They had turned surrender into victory and defeat into liberation. A young alien approached her, one of the students from her first cultural orientation class. "Dr. Chen," the alien said, "I have a question." "What's that?" "If humans are so good at spreading freedom, Why did it take so long for your own species to become free? Dr. Chen laughed. Who says we're finished? We're still learning, still growing, still making mistakes and figuring out better ways to live together. Freedom isn't a destination, it's a journey. And now the whole galaxy is on that journey. Dr. Chen confirmed. As the celebration continued into the night, ships from across the galaxy arrived and departed, carrying the lessons of freedom to worlds that were still learning what it meant to think for themselves. The hegemony was gone forever, replaced by something better, a galaxy full of free beings, each choosing their own path, each contributing their own unique perspective to the endless, chaotic, beautiful experiment of civilization. Thank you for watching and comment for next part.